Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Mangruen-Brown. I'm an author of 3 self-published books so far. One is Runaway Blue, Hazel's Perception, What I Know Now, and Frank's Guilt, What I Did Then. Hazel's Perception and Frank's Guilt are both short stories that are a part of Runaway Blue. These stories are being told by different characters to sort of fill in some of the gaps of the main story. Once you begin to read Runaway Blue, you'll notice that some of the characters, they have a really high importance, but they're not being talked about throughout so much of the story because it's not about them, it's about Blue. So you're going to wonder what happened to these people when they weren't around. How did they meet? Why did they do this? Where did they go? What happened? That's what these short stories are about. And just like with Blue, with these stories, you also become that character. So when you're reading Hazel's Perception, you become Hazel. When you're reading Frank's Guilt, you become Frank. They follow the same storyline as Runaway Blue, but they're completely different stories because they're completely different people living their own lives. So they have drama, they have issues, they have, again, their own lives to live. So these books aren't about Blue. It's about them, but it involves their relationship with Blue from the time that they met and so on. Right now, I want to talk about Runaway Blue. A lot of people ask me what this book is about, and I always have trouble explaining it because it involves so many different things. In this book, you become the character. You become Anthony Blue Rogers. Your mind connects with his. You feel his emotion. You feel his stress, his anger, but you also feel the love and the happiness and everything in between. I guess the only way to truly understand what I mean is to read the book and walk a mile in Blue's shoes. So here I am going to read chapter 1 of Runaway Blue. Each book is available now on Amazon.com. The audiobook for Hazel's Perception is also available on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes. Please share my YouTube channel, Mindwriters, and subscribe. You can also find me on Instagram and Twitter. I hope you enjoy it, and I thank you for listening. Here is Runaway Blue. Runaway Blue, written by Michael Mangruen-Brown. Prologue. Every morning I run. It keeps me from overthinking. I don't know if it's because it's freeing or because I'm running away from something. What could it be? Could be me. Could be something deeper. Darker. I'm not exactly sure what it is. All I know is the heavy feeling of the wind hitting my face while my feet take me wherever they may. The strength in my legs takes me as far as possible, but the moment I stop, the pain comes rushing back. And so do the memories. It's been 2 years, 3 months, 14 days, 8 hours, and 26 minutes since I saw them last. My parents. The lies they sold me, the secrets they kept. I do not regret what happened to them. I regret what they've done and what they made me out to be to the world. Scorned for being my mother's child. Hated, teased, cast out by those I called friends and those I called family. They called me the spawn of demons. Truthfully, a part of me believed it, but I could never come to accept it. I am not a bad person. Who am I, you ask? I'm just a 17-year-old who has no choice but to walk on this dark and lonely path with what feels like a knife of despair embedded into my back. What am I? I am the son of murderers, and my name is Anthony Blue Rogers. Chapter 1. My Brother's Brother. It was Tuesday, August 20th, 2013, in the beginning of my sophomore year in high school. I was pretty excited for school that year and glad that I would be able to spend it with my three best friends, Frank Hampton, Tyler Cross, his sister, and my crush Rosetta. She prefers to be called Rose, and Tyler just prefers Ty. Life seemed good at Maywood High, minus the faction that called themselves the heads of Maywood, aka the popular kids. Like what you see on TV, they're just a small group of assholes who think they're better than everyone else. They were envied by most, but not me. I was pretty content with my loser friends. We couldn't care less about the higher-ups in their reign. The first period was about to begin, and already I was being called to the principal's office. My friends began to fool around and tease me. "See you on the other side," they said playfully. What awesome friends I had. I loved those idiots. They were like family. I walked into the principal's office and noticed my parents sitting down, tears running down my mom's face while my dad sat in silence. The look on his face said more words than his voice ever could. It had to be about my older brother. There was no other reason for them to be there. "Don't tell me," I said to my parents as I already figured it out. See, my brother wasn't exactly a man of honor and respect. He was a drug addict who lied, stole, cheated on, and abused his girlfriend. He'd been incarcerated at the state prison due to a drug deal gone bad situation. I hadn't seen or spoken to him in over a year. Unfortunately, that moment in the principal's office, death came with bad news from a crying woman and a silent man. My big brother was gone for good. Suicide, they said. But I knew better than to believe that. My brother made a lot of enemies, and his cellmate was one of them. I know this because he told me when I went to visit him the first time out of 3. Before he told me to never come back. Never let them know who I was to him, and because he was scared when he said it, more for me than himself. No matter what he did, he was still my big brother, and I worried about him. Again, I knew. Even after I heard the news, I wanted to remain in school. It was the first day, and I didn't want to go home. It was too lonely there anyway, so I was better off. I went to class and acted as if everything was normal. Fortunately, no one knew the difference in my expression since I was always the strong silent type when not around my friends. With them was the only time I could be myself, and it was then when they were needed. The first day was a long one. The crew and I regrouped to hang out and just chill in Tyler's shed. That was our hangout spot. Anything was better than going home at that point. Anything was better than going back any day. I didn't tell them what happened yet because at the moment all I wanted to do was not think about it. It helped, but I couldn't completely ignore it. I stalled from going home. That was the last place I wanted to be. I could have stayed at Tyler's, but Frank had already passed out on the couch, and I would much rather sleep in my soft, clean bed than on a pallet on a dirty floor. I chose to take the long way home. I took my time as I always did. With only a $10 bill in my pocket, I didn't worry about someone robbing me since I had nothing worth stealing. Though getting jumped for no reason was always a more than likely possibility. Luckily for me, there was still a familiar face around. It was someone my brother used to hang with before he got caught doing the same shit as that familiar face was doing. It was probably the reason my brother got caught up in the first place. Who knows? It's not like there were any brave witnesses or anything. Maybe I wasn't so lucky after all. Once I arrived home, everything was just as expected. The crying mother was no longer upset, and the silent father, who laughed at the same comedy sitcom he watched every day with a bottle of brandy at his side. Then there was me, walking through the door unnoticed. No one said a thing. No one cared to ask me if I was okay. Honestly, I think they were happier knowing he was out of their lives for good than upset about losing their son. I immediately went straight to my room and locked the door, but I wasn't alone. It was just me and my love that night. Sweet old Mary J. It was a momentary bliss as I laid there relaxed, lost in my own thoughts, covered in a shroud of smoke. I stared at a photo of Rose, a new life in my head with her as my wife. I can still see it now, just as I did then. A big house with good jobs, at least 4 kids, and a big dog named Shooter. Shooter's a stupid name, I know, but hey, I was high and it was my dream, so just go with it. What I would have done to have her was anything. Eventually, I passed out dreading the new day because I knew it would only be a repeat of that previous day, minus the $10. The next morning, I awoke following the same routine. Shower, brush teeth, get dressed, go downstairs to an unconscious drunk bastard and a lazy fat lady called my parents. My mom didn't make breakfast for anyone but herself most days, so I was always stuck with a PB&J sandwich. Never had time to cook me an excellent hearty breakfast because they made me walk to school, which was just over 3 miles away. My friends always asked me how I stayed in shape. Starvation and long walks and lousy parenting seemed like a valid answer. I couldn't wait to get to school. The way my home life was, school was like paradise. I had my crew, my sense of freedom, and I got to hang out with Rosetta, the most beautiful girl in the world. If only the words of how I felt could have come out right then. The fear of rejection and Ty's massive fist kept me from doing that. Tyler was a big guy with anger issues, and sadly he scared me. He is very overprotective of his little sister. On the bright side, no one would dare start a fight with him, which kept us from getting picked on. At least when he was around, that is. I arrived at school expecting things to go smoothly, but was wrong. Frank immediately hurried over to me and said, "Yo, I heard what happened." I asked him how he found out. He told me it was all over the news that morning, but I missed it. Then he said something to me that had me all confused. He asked if I told my brother the bad news. I was so lost. I didn't know what the hell he was talking about, so I asked him, "What the hell are you talking about?" He responded with the same confusing look I gave him and said, "What the hell are you talking about?" We were talking about two completely different things. He heard that Cassandra, my brother's girlfriend, was killed the previous night in her home. That couldn't have been a coincidence. My brother died in his cell the same day his girlfriend got murdered. Something was off about that. I didn't know Cassandra that well. I only met her a few times because my brother was never around. My parents didn't want anything to do with him or the company he kept. Frank asked me once more what it was I was talking about. I was so lost in thought that I didn't hear him. He snapped his fingers across my face to get my attention and asked me again. I told him what I was told about what happened to my brother. Then I told him what I thought happened. Though shocked to hear what happened, he figured out why I was so unusually quiet the day before. He wondered why I didn't say anything about it. The truth is, I still hadn't yet wrapped my head around it. It just hadn't hit me, I guess, and that's what I told him. He understood what I meant. He too lost a brother to the streets. Gang violence it was. His brother and mine were in the same gang, and they were as close as blood. That's how I met Frank. Blood couldn't have made us any closer. We always said we'd be brothers till death came knocking on one door or the other. Frank agreed with me that something had to be going on with the whole situation. Could Cassandra's death be the reason why my brother told me to stay away? I asked him. Because he knew it would happen to me? My brother always made sure to keep me away from the people he rode with and whatever business he was involved in. So did Frank's brother with him, which was probably the real reason we were able to become friends. My brother didn't share the same last name as I. Different dads we have. That's why only a handful of people know we're even related and possibly why I wasn't the one murdered in my sleep. That had to be the reason he told me to never see him again. He knew that someone was going to come after his loved ones. He must have been murdered. He must have known this would happen. I started to freak out. My body wouldn't stop shaking. My head was so clouded that I didn't even notice Ty and Rosetta approaching or the people staring. Frank quickly pulled me into the bathroom, hoping to snap some sense into me before my head exploded. If I hadn't listened to my brother, I could have been the one on the news that morning. To think that there was a possibility I still might have. I couldn't stay there. I need to leave school. I need to get out of here. Saying these things while becoming frantic to the point where I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding so fast that I was sure it would burst out of my chest. I immediately ran outside and across the football field. I didn't know where I was running to. I just ran until I was too tired to run any longer, leaving both Frank and Tyler far behind to the point where they were no longer in sight. It was then that I realized something. Though I was utterly exhausted and out of breath, I could breathe again. That entire time I was running, I thought about absolutely nothing, and it was so freeing. Shortly after, I passed out from exhaustion. But moving forward, I began to run to and from school instead of walking. I would find the longest path home and take off. As I was regaining consciousness, I saw what looked like an angel being sent down from heaven. She was the most beautiful angel I had ever seen. After I regained focus, I realized that beautiful angel was Rose looking down on me. That was right before she smacked the living life out of me. She struck me so hard that I felt my soul eject itself from my body. I think I died. She then wrapped her arms around me and squeezed me so tight that whatever life force I had left in me started to disintegrate. It was a happy moment for me. I mean, we've hugged before, but this was something else. It was love. Not the type of love I dreamt of, but it was Rosetta. I would have taken anything I could get from her. She started yelling at me. She told me to never scare her like that again and made me promise. I did. I made a promise to her that I was sure I'd never break. I grew lost in her eyes as she smiled at me. Sadly, the moment was short-lived. All of a sudden, everything was dim. Ty was standing directly over me. I looked up. He looked down. We stared at each other for about 8 seconds. It was a long 8 seconds. Longest 8 seconds of my life. The second he opened his mouth to speak, I jumped a little. I thought I was going to die again. Everyone thought it was just so hilarious. He knew he intimidated me a little, and he used that against me. There is no doubt they all knew I had feelings for Rose, and I'm sure she knew it. She knew I'd do anything for her. I was a sucker for her, and it was clear as day. I could never have her, though. So is anyone going to tell me why this fool just ran all the way out here like his life was at stake? Asked Tyler. Frank and I looked at each other, but I didn't want to say anything. I was already embarrassed about that whole episode just then. Still, they were my friends, and they were all I had, so I explained everything to them as we walked back towards Ty's shed. We decided to just skip school altogether that day because they felt it was best for my sake. It was nice being able to talk to them about everything. Frank didn't think there was anything to worry about. Rosetta comforted me, making sure I was all right, and Ty always had to be the tough guy ready to fight. The day ended better than it started. After a while, I completely stopped thinking about the worst and enjoyed my time with the few people who actually cared about me. They would never understand how much they meant to me or what it was they did for me. We were only 2 weeks into the school year, and I wasn't exactly off to a great start. My brother's funeral happened within the first week, with Cassandra's being 2 days before his. They were both cremated, and the ashes were tossed into the lake. At least my brothers were. My parents still refused to let any part of him around. Even after death, they rejected him. My mom didn't attend his funeral. As for my dad, shockingly, he seemed pretty upset. It wasn't a look of caring or loss, though. It was more like a look of guilt, as if it was his fault. He turned to me, placed his hands hesitantly onto my shoulders, and said to me, "I'm sorry." That was the first time he had ever apologized for anything. I thought to myself, why now? And sorry for what exactly? I'm no fool, though. It was just a show for the small number of people who had actually shown up. It was confirmed to me the second we made it home. Same old routine. Same old comedy sitcom. Same old drunk bastard. I tried so hard not to hate my parents, but they made it hard for me to see the good in them. My dad was always drunk. Sometimes an abusive one. My brother got the worst of it, though. One time they got into this massive fight that ended in someone almost getting shot. That's what got him kicked out, but not hated. Not then, anyway. It did leave him homeless and alone, and turned led to drugs, getting involved with the wrong people, which led to prison and his death. I blamed them for what happened. I blamed them for everything. I felt as if they murdered my brother and didn't seem to care. I can never forgive them. The more I think about it, the more pissed off I get. I lived in a hellhole with these strangers, and it felt like I was about to lose it being there. I needed to go for a run. My parents were so lost in their little world that they didn't notice me dashing out of the house or the screen door slamming shut. It was like living with a couple of brain-dead, lifeless zombies. I made my way to the school's racetrack, but it wasn't empty. I was hoping to have it to myself. Just wasn't the same when surrounded by people, so instead I left. As I began to walk away, I noticed an all-black SUV with tinted windows sitting at the corner of the street. It may just have been paranoia due to recent events, but I swear I could feel someone staring directly at me. Maybe I'm just losing it, I thought. I was still pretty mad at my parents, so I must not have been thinking clearly. I took off without giving it a second thought, maybe 2 blocks down and hit the corner. I had a peculiar and uncomfortable feeling. There was a group of guys ahead of me staring in my direction, at least 5 of them. Is today the day something happens to me? That's what I kept asking myself and then thinking, damn, there goes that paranoia again. I looked away and started walking at a slightly faster pace. Tried to stay focused and couldn't stop looking over my shoulder every 5 seconds. A group of guys began walking in my direction, matching my pace. Really wasn't in the mood for that mess. With my house being pretty far away, I instead started to make my way to Tyler's. Damn, I hope he's home. I kept looking over my shoulder, and it seemed like every time I did, they were getting closer and closer. Is this really happening right now? I couldn't stop thinking that to myself. I couldn't deny it. They were after me, and I admit that I was a little scared. Looking back one last time, one of them yelled for me while reaching in his belt. I instantly saw the gun he was reaching for, and I took off. I ran as fast as I possibly could while being so scared. My heart was racing more quickly than it ever had. The adrenaline was pumping so fast that I couldn't even hear the shots fired, but I definitely felt the wind from the bullets flying past my head. I knew I was going to die, and I didn't even know why. I cut through yards, hopped over fences, and eventually lost them. That or they stopped chasing. Still, I kept running. I was almost at Tyler's, but had to stop for breath when the chance arose. Didn't want to pass out again and be an easier target. Unfortunately, there was no time. That black SUV mentioned earlier hit the corner at high speed, and I knew it was coming for me. I had to get to Tyler's. I kept running and wasn't stopping until I got there. Guys were aiming their guns out the window, blasting rounds. It seemed almost never ending. I was going to die, and for what? Damn my brother for making so many enemies. Damn him for putting me through this. Damn him for... In the middle of cursing my brother for my death, I noticed the bullets stopped flying, and I no longer heard the engine revving from the SUV. I didn't realize it at first, but I was in gang territory, a gang that my brother was part of. Those guys in the truck must have been gangbangers from the opposite side of town. They wouldn't dare step foot into enemy territory when outgunned and outmanned. By the time I realized it was over, I had already made it to Tyler's. Frank's house was closer than his, but a lot of people knew him and his brother. Plus, Ty's dad is a cop, so his place was my first instinct. I was exhausted and used whatever energy I had left banging on the door. Could barely breathe with a sharp pain in my side. For a moment, I thought I was just out of shape. Someone finally came to the door, but my vision was too blurred to tell who it was. Too tired and weak to speak, and I began feeling lightheaded, thinking it was only exhaustion from running. Next thing I knew, I heard someone scream that sounded like it came from Rosetta. Couldn't tell as I was about to collapse on their front porch. A female voice yelled out, "Oh my God, you're bleeding!" I could barely hear anything. I could barely see anything. There I was, on my friend's front porch, bleeding out from bullet wounds on my back and side. When did I get hit? I asked myself this while riddled with pain only after noticing. Must have been so full of adrenaline that I didn't realize. I was dying. I felt that was the end of me, and it was all because of the choices my brother made, due to the choices my parents made. It was also the beginning. I wasn't ready to die, and all I could think about was how I didn't even get to say goodbye to anyone. I didn't get to tell Rose that I